Okay. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today at the RG Podcast. I'm joined with a very, very special guest, Subjectively Dan. Is that right? Did I get it right?
Haha, you're very, very funny. You're the
funny.
first person to make that joke. You know, so good for you.
No, I do want to say I'm a very big fan of yours. Punked was one of my. They shouldn't have canceled Punked. So.
Wow.
No?
Wow.
Man, don't tell me you got Ashton Kutcher before.
I'm about to leave. I'm about to head out now because I didn't realize I was going to get attacked like this.
Oh no, you're looking
great. Few minutes of this podcast, but okay.
You're a handsome man. No, it's a total joke. But how you doing this morning?
I'm doing okay. It's a Saturday morning here in Austin, Texas, and I'm just here talking with you. So I haven't done a whole lot this morning except getting ready for this podcast.
You had coffee? Had you coffee?
I'm not a coffee guy.
Really?
I don't really do that. No.
Oh, all right. Tea? You like tea?
I like tea occasionally, but I don't really make it for myself too much.
Yeah, I live in South Korea, and so if you go, they have some tea markets with like hundreds of kinds of teas. It's quite amazing. So that being said, I do want to start off with a friendly fire round. So we like to, some of these talks can get a little bit contentious, so we like to have a little bit of a friendly fire round. So you ready for that?
I am ready for that. Let's go.
Okay. So if you're going to make a waffle with 3 ingredients, this is like the ultimate waffle, what would you be putting on it?
A waffle with 3 ingredients. Well, so I am a vegan, so it does make my options a little bit different. I probably would do some kind of syrup, maybe maple, let's see.
I like honey.
Yeah, honey unfortunately isn't vegan, but there are some honey substitutes.
Oh, right, that's right.
There. Yeah, and maybe some strawberries. I like strawberries.
All right, there you go.
So,
all right. Here we go. So if you got stuck on an island, what one item would you want with you? Not a phone or a boat, or don't say a boat. That's cheating.
But that's the one item I would want, though.
You got stuck. You had to live your life on an island. Let me clarify.
If I have to live my life on an island, a phone wouldn't have. Presumably wouldn't have signal out there. But
no signals.
Like, what about
a router? How about a router?
No, because you still need power for the router. I was gonna say maybe if you have a generator. And then you could but I don't know enough about electronics to build stuff off that. So
this next question is going to be not applicable because I just found out you're vegan. But what was your favorite hamburger? Past tense.
Well, there's still veggie burgers and stuff. I mean, you can still get Beyond Beef patties and stuff like that. So that counts.
I used to be vegetarian, by the way, when I was in Bible college after I graduated, and then I came to South Korea, and my gloves come off whenever I travel. So I'm like, I'll eat whatever the hell you put in front of me. So, I ate some stuff here I'm not exactly proud of. But okay, if you had to grow up on any sitcom, what sitcom would you want to grow up on?
If I had to grow up on a sitcom, I think the point of at least most sitcoms is that the families are dysfunctional. I mean, maybe not like some of the older ones, like the Brady Bunch, but gosh, I don't know. Man, it's been a while since I've seen any good sitcoms. Family Matters.
Go to the Family Matters.
I don't know. Family
you'd be a little out of place on the Family Matters set, though.
Well,
man.
I would be out of place, but also, do I go to that time period because that changes things too? Like maybe Full House, I'd fit in a little better.
Full House, there you go. Okay. So if you're gonna die in one country, spend the last year of your life in a country, what country would you want to be? Not the United States.
And it can't be the U.S. Oh man. Yeah. Wait, so important thing, am I like a naturalized citizen? Do I have the rights of other people, or am I still like a foreigner?
You pick. Just where would you want to die?
If I could be a naturalized citizen, I'd go to like the Netherlands or something.
Oh yeah. I spent a month there after I got separated with my wife. I spent a month there just trying to decompress or whatever, and that place is amazing. You would love that place if you're a vegan hippie. They're totally environmentalists and everything. It's amazing. Sure. All right. So if you're going to get killed by any fictional horror character, who would you want to die at the hands of? And don't say God, because that's cheating.
fictional horror
Don't say
character.
God.
Man, I'm clearly not prepared for these questions. I got to think
How
about
about
this.
Chucky? I'll help you.
But see, I'm thinking, well, if I'm going to be killed, I want it to be the most pleasant way possible,
Okay.
right? Like, I don't want to be super scared. So maybe like, I don't know, gosh, somebody who would kill me in my sleep, like the Scream guy, maybe, or Jason
Okay.
Voorhees. I don't know
All
if
right.
they would, but that's how.
All right. All right. That's kind of one of my favorite questions to ask. It's such a ridiculous question, but all right. And then I'll just give you one last one. But if you were in charge of the torture department of the CIA and you had to play a song on loop to break somebody, what song would you want to play for them?
Man, this is like there. I would describe my politics as leftist, but there's an inner anarchist in me that wouldn't want to torture on behalf of the state. But I guess if I had to, I would say, like "Call Me Maybe."
That's pretty
song.
good.
That's
What
a
is your
good
name?
one to
Like
put on loop.
Jepsen
Yeah,
something?
Carly Rae Jepsen.
Yeah.
And full
You
disclosure,
literally might break the person's mind though, so you might not even get any information.
I
I'd
love
say
me some Carly Rae. I could handle it, but
anything by BTS though, I think would get the job done. But that being
that's
said,
a good one too.
I don't hear any twang in your talk because I heard you from Texas.
Well, there's 25 million people that live in the state of Texas. Not all of us sound the same, but I have gotten that commentary before. I grew up my whole life in Texas, but for people outside of Texas, a lot of people don't think I sound like it. I do say words like y'all.
You do say y'all.
I do say y'all.
That's the sign. Well, you have to. That's kind of like a mandatory. You have to say y'all. You don't even want to. You have to say y'all.
It's pure instinct at this point. I don't think you can get it out of me. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, my ex-girlfriend used to live in Texas, and I went to school in Missouri, so I used to go down there a lot. And some very beautiful scenery there. The wildflowers are amazing. So, and so you went to school there as well?
Yeah, I did. I did go to school here in Texas. Went to high school and college here in Texas. So.
And how old are you now, by the way?
I'm 26 years old.
Wow! You're a young buck. You're still a young guy.
That's what they tell me. I don't feel like that these days. But
wait you get to my age, your knee starts to go bad. You lose all your hair, and enjoy your youth while you have it. Let's say that. All right. So, I was wondering first and foremost if you could give me your. Okay. Well, first of all, do you consider yourself an atheist, or would you call it an atheist?
Yeah, so like to the general public, right? If I'm just talking to a person off the street and they ask me what my religious beliefs were, I would use the word atheist because I think in the common nomenclature, the everyday person, people would understand what that means. Although people do get that word wrong. In fact, there's quite a bit of debate in the atheist community.
I saw you get it wrong.
That means
with Magnabosco, by the way, I saw that.
Yeah, when I first talked with Anthony Magnabosco, I definitely used the word in a totally non-standard way. But I think it gets the job done enough. Agnostic is another one I would probably use. But if I were to get more into the core of how I would describe myself, I choose the word atheist because atheist is almost more of a commentary than it is a particular set of, ideological beliefs, right? It's just more saying that when we talk about this idea of God, at least historically in Western philosophy, we always talk about it in the Christian sense. I mean, it's almost universal to continental and European philosophers to talk about God in that way. So I kind of use atheists to put a stop to that and say, hey, well, we have to consider all possibilities of what we mean by God, because it's a very Western-centric notion to just say, oh, we're just talking about the Christian God. There's been hundreds of cultures around the world who have different ideas of what a creator being, what a God being would be, and we have to take that into account. So until I can define that, really that's what atheist means, is until we define what God means first, I can't even comment on its existence or not. Because if you just say God is nature, well, yeah, I think nature exists. so I wouldn't be an atheist under that lens. But if you think God is the Judeo-Christian God that Jesus spoke to, like, then no, I don't think that particular God exists. So it's going to vary.
Yeah, okay, that's reasonable. And you've not you've been an atheist for about atheist. When I first read atheist, I was like, is that like where you like believe in fish? Because my sister says she's like a Icarian or something like that, where
Yeah.
she only eats fish.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
or she.
It is more of an obscure word, which is why,
Yeah.
again, in the general public, I just say atheist, and
Yeah.
that pretty much gets the job done.
By the way, do you know what vegetarians zombies eat?
What do vegetarian zombies eat?
Grains. Okay. I'll be here all week. Don't forget to tip your waitress. Okay. So, all right. So, can you just tell me real quick, just in 2 minutes, about this Agni Magnabosco cat and how you met him and that whole process? Because I've been watching you online and I had no idea that you were actually converted by that guy. So if you give me a little bit of context, just really quickly, and then we'll get into these questions.
Yeah. So first, let me tell you about Anthony, and then I can tell you about my relationship with him. So Anthony Magnabosco is most known for doing this type of work called street epistemology. And street epistemology is this idea that kind of like how Socrates would go up to his friends and people in the street and ask them questions about what they believed. We want to kind of emulate the same thing. Street epistemologists do, right? Kind of want to have the ability to talk to people about what they believe and why in comfortable settings, but also to figure out, what is it that really drives them. I think street epistemologists in general do believe that beliefs matter, that what people believe affects their daily lives and how they operate in the world. So it's important that we examine these things. So street epistemologists are interested in figuring out good questions to ask ourselves and to ask other people, why they believe the things that they do. So Anthony would ask people these questions on his YouTube channel, and he did it for a couple of years before he actually ran into me. In 2015 is what it was. No, 2016 actually. 2016 is when it happened. Oh gosh. But no, it was actually I lied. It was late 2015, October of 2015. I remember that now.
All right.
And when that happened, I see that you have also made the mistake, and many Christians do, in describing that Anthony deconverted me. Because when you see a video of, hey, you're talking to me as an atheist, and then another video where he's talking to me as a Christian, the through line is, oh, this conversation is the reason why he turned. And I don't attribute my change in beliefs from that. I do consider it a stepping stone. But like anybody else, beliefs are complicated. There are very few people in this world who change their beliefs from a single conversation. To change their worldviews, that radically, right? It took a while. It took about a year before I actually called myself an atheist.
Okay, all right.
But it's important to point that out, because when people see that, they think, oh, well, this is this magic method that you can use to just brainwash people and make them believe what you want, and that's not the case. That's not the goals of SC. Yeah,
I don't agree with that, because that the first question is, why is Socratic, why is the street epistemology and Socratic method so effective? That's the one we're going to get into. But I do want to say Stacy is watching, and I do have to say, Stacy, before the podcast, Objectively Dan and I were talking, and you said you totally bombed our interview. So yeah, you did a great job.
That is hearsay, absolute hearsay. Did not say that.
No, she did wonderful. I was actually just watching right before you called. You were interviewing an Eve girl, and that was a very similar story to hers. I thought that was interesting. But so, any chance you've ever seen The Matrix?
Definitely. Yep.
And what about Inception?
Definitely also. Yes. Okay.
So yeah, 2 of my probably top 10 of all time. But in Matrix, the reason why they have a Matrix is because they've programmed these people to have like a simulation, so they can use them for batteries. And they said that they initially made the matrix system to be perfect, and that people actually wound up rejecting it in their mind. And so the thing is, you really have to accept something. Like, you couldn't deconvert me, or you know what I mean? It has to be something that genuinely comes from within. And so, like, did you ever see Inception? You said you saw Inception.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Inception, give away one spoiler here. Cover your ears if you don't want to hear this one. But they're trying to implant a thought into someone else's mind, and they literally have to go multiple layers into his subconscious to try to do that, because they knew if they just try to come in and change his mind directly, that it wasn't going to work. So I know you can say these are just movies, but these movies many times play out some philosophical ideas there. So what are your thoughts as far as those two go? And then why is the Socratic method and street epistemology so effective? And by the way, just one thing, actually in the Greece, in the Parthenon, like, I got to see exactly where Socrates was forced to kill himself. So that was pretty cool. But anyway, okay. Can you get on that?
So I guess, are you asking me what I think about those movies, or are you asking me what I think about the philosophical implication of these movies? Yeah, like, what exactly is your question?
Yeah, well, the main question is, why do you think that this method is so effective? And also I will just chime in a little bit.
Because I guess I hear two different questions. I'm hearing what makes SC effective, and what do I think about the Matrix and Inception?
Yeah, the Matrix, because it's philosophically trying to understand that you can't just force someone to think in this kind of way with the Matrix. So they had to provide this Matrix to get people, like, even an illusion of free will. You know, they couldn't just make the people like robots, because I'm sure they would. But yeah. About respecting people's autonomy, essentially.
Well, again, like with street epistemology, the goal isn't a top-down, here's what you need to believe, and here's how I'm going to get you to believe that. It's an examination, a critical examination of people's beliefs. People who practice SC, of course, is very popular in the atheist community, because many atheists believe that by doing a method of critical thinking like this, you would eventually come to the same conclusions that they would. But really, anybody that can engage in this methodology might have their beliefs change, but might not, and may find that the beliefs they already hold are actually still viable and still tenable to hold. So it shouldn't be unique to the atheist sphere. I mean, I think anybody can ask themselves Socratic questions and could possibly even still hold, for example, a Christian worldview to be true. So, you know, it's often projected as this idea of, again, converting people to atheists. And in fact, Peter Boghossian, the guy that wrote the book on street epistemology, definitely had intentions for that. But the street epistemology community has really rejected that notion community wide. We really do think that it's just tools for anybody to use.
So that's what I call evangelical atheism. Do you think that that's an accurate word, or no? I guess from
what do you call it? You mean SE, or people who practice SE?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it does seem a little bit odd to go out and try to ask people like why they believe in something. Like, I don't know, just me personally, it's like, okay, I don't know. I personally wouldn't want to deconvert someone from whatever they're believing. And I'm telling you, as a missionary, it's like, I think ultimately what it is with that method, why I think that's effective is because you're not trying to get them to change their mind. You, like with the Socratic method, you get down to the simplest fundamental assumptions that they have, and you're allowing them to come to conclusions by themselves. You know?
Yeah.
So that's why I think it's so effective. I think the Socratic method, and even in a sense, the street epistemology is effective in that sense.
Well, if you go to anybody that practices SC on their channels, especially most notably like Anthony, like he'll talk to anybody that wants to talk to him on camera. That includes atheists, that includes agnostics, that includes people who have similar conclusions to him. Again, the point in doing that is a demonstration of the method and its usefulness. Again, not necessarily as a tool to convert, so to speak. In fact, you'll find that while there aren't as many, there are Christians that believe that by using SE, you can become a stronger Christian, and will go out and ask similar questions on the street. Now, evangelism is the idea of saying, well, this is the correct ideology, this is the truth, this is the word, and saying that we want to spread this word as far as possible to everyone. I mean, that was the original mission of the Nicene Creed, right? I mean, these are the people who are the original apostles wanted to do. They wanted to spread the word of Jesus out to everyone. I don't think the SC community would really view their goals to be the same way. I want everyone to be able to have the tools to think about their beliefs critically, and if they end up changing their minds for the better, that's great. But at the end of the day, we live in a world where people are going to have divergent beliefs. We need to have some sort of tool in which we can communicate the differences in those beliefs, and I think SE is the way to do it.
That's fair. You had mentioned being able to use it in other ways, and I used to be an extremely left-wing, like literally communist level liberal, and living overseas and going to dozens of countries for like 10 years now, it's made me more moderate. I wouldn't say I'm like, I wouldn't say I'm a Democrat or a Republican. It's like, because they have extreme ways of thinking. So I'm just kind of like in the middle of the road. Both sides have things right and wrong with them. But back in college, remember, I was really liberal, and a lot of Christians are evangelical conservative, and I would ask them questions about using the same kind of method, because some of the stuff that they say just makes absolutely, like, I was just listening to you about the Christian nationalism, and even about something like an abortion or like homosexuality, whatever, that they want to use the government to, enforce those kind of things. And if you were to ask them, well, do you believe that the government should be like, endorsing people's, sexual lives, whatever, especially based on the Bible, then you're going to have to say something like Donald Trump would not be allowed to get remarried, because by the Bible's definition, that would be an adulterous relationship. So it's like, it just goes to show the hypocrisy of what you're believing. And I think if you can point that out, it would be good. Again, people are going to have bias and inconsistent views no matter what. I don't think you're going to be able to solve that you're going to be able to solve that yourself. People have to come to these realizations that, hey, they have some conflicting views here, and that's okay. We should be untangling and unpacking our views all the time. So I do want to get on to the second question. But by the way, don't tell me you've never gotten Ashton Kutcher before.
No, I that's why I was saying, like, you're not the first person to tell me that I look like Ashton Kutcher, which is very funny to me.
Literally, Punk'd is like my favorite show of all. I mean, that it's so childish, but man, I love it. Okay, so do you think that debate is a worthwhile endeavor? And a follow-up question is, how or why can two people see the same debate and come to wildly different conclusions?
Yeah, so the reason why people can come to wildly different conclusions is because most people go into debates already on a side.
Already decided?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's not a lot of statistics that talk about, theist debates, but there are statistics that talk about how the presidential debates affect people. And the most that people change their mind are usually about within 2 months before an election actually happens. And even in that, when watching the presidential debates, they poll people saying, what do you think before? What do you think after? And the needle really doesn't change that much for most people. If you're already interested in a topic like, say, abortion, and you want to say, hey, I want to see debates on this topic, you probably already are coming in with a side with it already, right? If you're the kind of person that wants to spend their time listening to hour-long debates, you're already going to have probably at least an opinion on it. Maybe it's not fully developed, but you'll have an idea, and you're going to be more interested in the people that are supporting your side and what they have to say. Maybe you'll consider another argument from another side, but you're probably doing that so that you can break it down easier next time somebody wants to talk
Yeah.
to you about it. So in general, no, I don't think debates are as effective as people think they are. Do I think that they have a place? Absolutely. I mean, obviously it does work for some people. But I think it's more to show the health of one side's arguments, right? The health of the rhetoric. It's something that you can collectively find an argument for a single side in one space and examine them from like a rhetorical perspective on their effectiveness. If I want to figure out what are the talking points of the Republican Party, for example, I am going to look at the primaries. I am going to look at these debates and see what are the issues they consider important, or at least what they want people to hear, so that I can evaluate that, effectively.
Sure. And one of the biggest problems, I think, is because your average person doesn't really understand like logical fallacies. Like your average Joe Blow, you walk around and you find them, they're not going to really understand like deep philosophical concepts.
Sure.
So especially with something like a debate, like literally as bad of a debater as Trump was, like as horrible of a debater as he was, dude was a lot more entertaining to watch than his other people, I mean, he had some pretty strong zingers. I mean, there were some, I mean, objectively speaking, I got to say some of those were pretty, he probably didn't write them himself, probably had his team of people writing them for him. But really, as far as material and subject matter, he was so weak and so unknowledgeable on the topics. But if you're going to attack the person personally or make like just ridiculously stupid arguments that just sound good, like sophistry, it gives room to sophistry. And as you talked about going into a conversation with your mind already made up, that's the problem from a debater's side as well, because you're really not trying to find the truth. You're trying to defeat the other person in an argument. So when they're making a case, you're not even trying to fully develop and hold the idea. One of my atheist co-hosts said, you got to hold their idea in your head and truly try to understand it from their perspective, the way that they see it. And that's why if you look at our emblem over there, you can see the R's like inverted on themselves. And so that can be really dangerous because you're not really trying to process, you're trying to win the argument. And that can be just, I don't know. I don't like debating people. It's in college, I used to just ream people. I mean, in debate class, I was just feared. But the older I've gotten, I've definitely have taken more joy in like actually trying to find out where people are coming from and why they believe it, and trying to learn from each other. I think. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I've only participated in a few debates when people have asked me to, but in general, I'm not that person. Maybe in the future, if more people want to see that. But again, my mission is beyond just doing debates with people. My mission, at least online, is to help people in thinking about their beliefs and their ideas more critically, giving them the tools to do so, and showing people how to have better conversations. And in some ways, debates are quite antithetical to what a street epistemologist's goals might be.
Right. I totally, yeah. I totally see that. That's really good. By the way, you said you've been doing a call-in show for about 3 years, 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, it started in October of 2018, so a little over 3 years now.
All right. And how is that? How's that going? Like on a weekly basis? You enjoy doing that?
Yeah. So, Truth Wanted is the primary show in which I host. It's the one that I created. I also host at the Atheist Community of Austin's Talk Heathen as well. And I host on there about once a month. But yeah, Truth Wanted is my main bread and butter. I quite enjoy it. I like having a space that I can express my thoughts out into the world. Last week, I got to do the first in-person show since the pandemic. So
Really?
we had, I don't know how many people, between 50 to 100 people, maybe out there.
Showed up?
Yeah, in person
Oh
for that.
wow.
Um,
Oh, okay. So hold on. I sometimes hear laughing, and I always think that it's like a laugh track, but those are real people.
Well, last week's one was, yeah. And in the beginning, well, I say in the beginning, before the pandemic, we had, we would always do it in studio. And of course, the studio is open to the public for people to come in. So we'd have
Oh,
people come
okay.
in and yeah, whenever you hear laughs like that on some of the other shows and stuff, like, yeah, those are real people.
Wow. You know what you guys should do? You should release a video just like what the inside of the studio looks like behind the scenes. That would be really cool.
There's a couple of videos out there
Really.
with
Okay.
the
Never
studio.
mind then.
You can
That would
take
be
a
a
look
waste of
at it.
time.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely out there.
Okay, cool. And by the way, are you like on a first name basis with Dillahunty?
Yeah, yeah, I know Matt. He lives also in the Austin area, so I've hosted with him and done stuff with him. Yeah.
Yeah, I posted two. I have two people, Eric Murphy and Kenneth Leonard, and then actually your buddy, the 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 guy who's on this.
You're talking about Holy Kool-Aid?
No. Because Holy Kool is not a part of that specifically, but the guy who does the film podcast, Intner, Josh Intner. I
Yeah,
host.
Josh Hentner. Mm-hmm.
I talked to him, and then J Mike supposedly coming on here pretty soon. So that should be interesting. That guy's really smart, man. He actually intimidates me, J Mike. But okay, I want to give you a little bit of context to this one, but the question is, in what ways do both theists and non-theists belittle or dehumanize each other? Because you've got to see this side from both. You got to see this from both sides. As a believer and now as a non-believer. But yeah, how do you think that? How do you think that? Maybe some of the rhetoric needs to be toned down a bit, or do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I do have a lot of thoughts. I mean, in terms of specifically conversations between Christians and atheists,
Mm-hmm.
Christians have been the dominant hegemonic power in the
Mm-hmm.
West for as long as Christianity has, well, not exactly as long as Christianity, but pretty much since Constantine. I mean, the Christians have always have a privileged place in our society, whereas atheists traditionally have not for most of that history. There are still laws that aren't legal and would not be enforceable, but that say that you can't be a state governor if you don't have a religious belief. There are still prejudices in the American public that suggest that atheists aren't good people. If you look at
Mm-hmm.
what
Mm-hmm.
Pew Research has to say, they have polls that talk about the temperament of how people view the person with each religious belief, and usually on par about every year, atheists are viewed in the same light as Muslims are in the United States. And you know how the average American feels about Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
It's typically not high. So
Yeah, don't get me started on that one, man. I freaking
yeah.
love Muslims. I love
So
Muslims.
right. So atheists take up that we're not always in the forefront of people's minds, but we do exist and we are there, and unfortunately people have those negative feelings about us. So the rhetoric in churches are simply that atheists are bad people. I mean, that's just been just a very common understanding of how we are, where we have no sense of morals, we have no sense of right and wrong. We just do what we want. We're complete hedonists in the worst sense of that word. And we can't accomplish anything. We'll just lead you down a path of temptation. So atheists, of course, are quite critical of this, and some even go insofar as to make fun of the intelligence of Christians and say, hey, if you believe this is you're an idiot, you're stupid, this is nonsense, and so you do see that kind of rhetoric on the atheist side in response. The atheist community in particular is very critical of the evangelical community, probably more
Right.
so than any other
So am I, by the way.
Christian community.
I'm
Right.
I'm a Christian, but I'm probably harder on those guys than you are because I know how wrong. I know more in depthly how wrong they are actually.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, in terms of which Christian group is still committing to like modern human rights abuses, I would say evangelicals, bar none, are the ones that are still active in committing that, who still have the legal power to make these kinds of changes on, specifically in the United States, right? There's plenty of super PAC groups and plenty of organizations that are actively wanting to enforce Christian ideas of what is right and wrong. For example, with the most recent abortion debates picking back up again, there are a lot of Christian groups that have made sure to donate to make sure that the bills that are being passed in all the states around the country are being passed for their specific interpretation of what a human life is and how you legislate that. So,
Yeah.
like I say that to say that the power balance isn't fair there, right? Do atheists make extreme points sometimes? Absolutely. And I wouldn't defend anyone that says, oh, you have a religious belief or all religion is the result of mental illness, things like that. That's not really where I go. But I do think it's important to point out the context in which atheists are talking about. Sometimes it may seem that an atheist point of view is extreme, but that's because we have been living under an extreme scrutiny for as long as Christianity has really existed.
So the thing is that I was an atheist for, I guess in a technical sense, I was only atheist for about 2 years, but I was just kind of at various times I bounced from deism to agnosticism, but then I also became convinced that there was a God, but I was just very, very anti that God. And I still do struggle with that sometimes. It does cause me some cognitive dissonance because I'm not, okay with everything that goes on in the Bible, or some stuff doesn't make sense to me. And it's certainly not how I would do things. But, but that being said, I'm a lot older than you. Just turned 40 actually a couple of weeks ago. But, I just sent you a picture today too of some Mormons who come over every week, and I make them food and we sit down and we talk, and I've interviewed them on the podcast, but it's these guys are 20-year-old dudes. What the hell do they know about? They're not going to be able to tell me or understand anything I have to say about fatherhood, parenthood, losing family members,
sure,
being homeless. I mean, there's just so many things. So I just try to meet them where they're at in their journey. And I really think Christians have dropped the ball on this so bad. The people who I am offended by a lot of things that atheists do and say, but I'm far more offended by your average Christian's beliefs. I'm more put off by that because we're supposed to be here with the truth, and we're supposed to be showing this to people with love and kindness, and there's just a lot of abuse, and there's people who really, really get off on that, if you look at Discord and stuff, some of the stuff that goes on there, you're just what? You guys are literally representing Jesus Christ here, and you're just abusing, and wherever they are, whether it's the LGBT or minorities or Muslims. That's one thing that pisses me off the most because I lived, I've got to go to a lot of, Muslim countries, and I'll just show you. This is me in Israel, by the way. You can believe that. I got to go into Palestine and stay at a mosque for a week there. And so I've probably been to a dozen or so mosques around the world. And these people are the nicest, most gentle, kindest people I've ever met in my life. And I tell you that with a completely straight face as a Christian. On 2 separate occasions, I was turned into an atheist by Christians out of Bible college, and from the abuse that I experienced from them, from being either charismatic or Democrat, But I've been received and loved by Muslims so much stronger than Christians. So I totally hate the abuse. I mean, here in South Korea, 2 of my best friends are Muslims. So I think the way Christians have treated them has been absolutely just god awful, just horrific. So very against that. But yeah, I just truly believe that we should be helping each other wherever we're at right now, whether you're Jew, agnostic, trans, homosexual, whatever, wherever you are, wherever you land. Agnosticism, deism, just we're on this planet together. We're being flung across the universe into the vastness of this universe together, and we should really be trying to love and help each other. But I do want to ask you a quick follow-up with that. What do you think that the secular community can learn from the Christian community, and vice versa?
Well, it's interesting you asked that because there's not enough data to confirm the exact numbers, because the atheist community is wide in how they identify themselves, and also isn't a community that's polled as much as other religious groups like Christians. But
Mm-hmm.
In my anecdotal experience,
Mm-hmm.
at least talking to folks who are active in the atheist community, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'd say at least 2/3 of them are former Christians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Most of them already understand what it's like to be Christians, already
Mm-hmm.
understand at least their particular denominational worldview, and have at least it's somewhat grown up in an environment that understands Christianity. If you grow up in the United States, you know who Jesus Christ is. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to be a Christian to know that.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird, but for a lot of human history, that wasn't necessarily the case for a lot of places to live. like it's so ingrained in the dominant culture that most people do have an understanding of that. Now, of course, people will say, "Oh, well, Christians are awful for believing X, Y, and Z," and of course, they may be talking about a specific denomination and applying it to the whole. And I would agree that wouldn't be correct. But for the most part, I've met more atheists that have read the Bible in its entirety than Christians have, to be honest with you. I mean, I think a lot of atheists know a lot about it. There's definitely some that are ignorant of it enough to where I wouldn't feel confident in them representing the community. And thankfully, in most cases, they don't. But it is what it is. People have their thoughts, and I will correct another atheist if they're wrong about it. But when I was a Christian, I was never given an education on what an atheist thinks about the world, or given the opportunity to speak to what an atheist might think about things. And in the Christian church, well, you already have the truth. You already know what's right. You already know what's wrong. It's the other people that are wrong, and that you have to
Mm-hmm.
give the word out to. So, in my experience, there is never a curiosity about what other people believe and why. It was always just here's the truth. Give it to the world. You already have it in your heart. So I would say I would wish that Christians would have a curiosity in understanding world cultures and beliefs that are outside of the Christian space.
Mm-hmm.
But that might seem heretical to some. There's some that might not accept
Yeah.
that idea.
So, and what do you think that the secular community can learn from believers or just people of faith?
Well, I mean, if I had to pick something, I mean, I guess I would say Christianity has an interesting cultural impact, especially in what is traditionally defined as the West and in Western countries. There's, of course, intrinsic to the development of the West. There's Christianity there, and its theological developments are synonymous with its cultural developments. In other words, what people have thought and actively interpreted about the Bible and its beliefs at the time have also affected how those cultures have lived. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think from that perspective, it's interesting to explore that and understand that, and of course see the outgrowth of that, which is of course lots of great buildings and great art. But outside of that, I don't think people have to really bother themselves too much with the nitty gritty on monism versus any other obscure philosophical opinions on whether God is
Yeah.
one with the sun or is the sun. These kinds of
Right.
debates that kind of come up in Christian communities are kind of nonsense for most atheists. So
Yeah. No, I totally get that. It's like we're sitting here. Okay. Yeah, we're sitting here, debating stuff, some philosophical stuff, whether or not we're going to work with a certain group. I'm talking about as believers, and yet if they don't have the correct understanding of like baptism, for example. I'm telling you from my personal experience, because I went to Church of Christ Church, and it's like, to them, if you didn't have the exact right belief on this topic, you weren't a Christian.
right.
And then my freshman year, they would tell us things like, you can't be a Democrat and be a Christian. And I'm like, my mom's a Democrat, she's a Christian. You've never met my mom. How are you going to make such a statement like that? That doesn't even make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I got turned into an atheist my freshman year for the political reason. And then later on, I went back to college to like try to find God. I'd wind up digesting 150 sleeping pills. And I had some really bad mental health issues whenever I was younger. And but I did go to Bible college to try to find God or whatever. And that just made me want nothing to do with it after that. But yeah, what you said about being closed off. I can't speak for everyone, but just on my own personal testimony was that, I could show you, look at this. I have like all the world religions. You can see this over here. I have all the world religions all over my body, like head to toe. And so I got to go into like, as I say, I stayed in a mosque in Palestine for like a week and learn from the Muslims. In fact, even now I've learned a lot from Muslims, like about faith, their commitment, seeing them go through Ramadan or just doing things like not eating pork. You ever had, or you don't eat meat, but you ever had Korean barbecue?
Yeah, I've had Korean barbecue.
Mm-hmm. I'll do it tomorrow here. But, even them avoiding things like that, like I love bacon, and I can't imagine. They're like, well, I don't believe I should do this or drink alcohol, and they'll stick to that. So I've learned a lot about their conviction, and, I don't know. I'm sure some people would have some vastly different experiences with Muslims, but my experiences have been now in the hundreds, and I've had nothing but positive experiences. I've had much worse with Christians, to be honest. But yeah, so here we go. Going on to the next. She was talking about being called out from our former church for the pulpit publicly. They called us evil. Oh, yeah. I'm very much against that, Stacy. I said, I personally think those people are assholes for doing it like in that manner. But okay, here we go. Number 4 is, what is the best way to build goodwill in conversations that may turn contentious? Contentious? I butchered that word.
Well, obviously that's going to depend a little bit on the subject matter and the context of that situation. But if you want to talk about it from just a street epistemology perspective, like actively having conversations with those you find out on the street or wherever in your daily life, always being an active listener first and foremost is probably one of the most important things, I would say. You want to make sure that other people are being heard, and when people don't feel like they're being heard, then they tend to shut down, because why would they continue to talk with somebody that they don't believe is listening to them? In fact, I would say that that's probably a big reason why most people don't trust the average street preacher, because
hold on.
Actually,
what did you say? I wasn't paying attention to you. Can you repeat that? No, that was a joke. I'm sorry. They don't trust the average street preacher. That's a joke.
Well, yeah, because is a street preacher going to have a back and forth conversation with you and say, yeah, maybe I can see from that point of view? No.
Right.
They're just going to say, this is what the Bible says, and you need to think that. That's not a conversation. It's literally preaching. So more people
literally.
Yeah. I tend to wait to see if people will ask me questions about things, and most people will, if they're being kind and they are generally interested, and we'll see where they want to take that conversation and make it most comfortable for them. Obviously, I've had conversations with people who I have very, very strong disagreements with, but I also know from a human psychology standpoint that, again, am I going to be the one that's absolutely going to yank their worldview out of their way in just a single conversation? No, but I might be able to plant a seed, especially if I think it's a worldview that's dangerous or harmful to others in the community. For example, those who are discriminatory towards LGBT peoples, which is unfortunately quite a common phenomenon in the Christian community. You have to gradually change their minds, and it's tempting to just yell at them and say, well, you're wrong.
Right.
And you, morally speaking, have every right to. But if you want to take things again from a psychology perspective and think what's going to be the most effective in your conversation here, you just have to take things slow.
Yeah. So a couple of things I wrote down. And I think in the conversations that I've had on atheists online, that the thing that they appreciate the most is whenever I'm open and honest, one, about the things I don't know, and then
Mm-hmm.
two, about how short I fall up to living up to what I preach about. And that's part of the humility of this podcast, is that I'm just completely honest. I'm like, you could just take around a coin with me and flip that thing up, and that's going to decide whether or not I'm going to do the right thing or not in a situation to live up to the Bible standards. And that's just a reality. When I first became a Christian, it was like 9 out of 10 times I would do the wrong thing because I was still a new believer. But the more I've grown, the more I've learned, having a wife, a daughter now, reuniting with my wife. I've learned a lot. It's gotten a lot better. But I would love to be in a point where I'm like, hey, 10%, 10 times, 100 out of 100, I'm batting the right way. But it's just not, it's not true. It's not the case. And I don't understand a lot of it about the Bible. A lot of it doesn't make sense. So whenever I have been open about some things that seem really illogical or really immoral, that's been something that they've responded to, which I think is really good. So admit when you don't know something, showing vulnerability, and also whenever you make a mistake, to acknowledge that and to not shy away from that. But I just posted some of these in the comments, and I do want to read them off real quick. But one, welcome the agreement. This is from Dale Carnegie's book, by the way, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's like the Bible of like communication. So welcome the agreement. Thank them for having the conversation. Another good one is to trust your first instinct and impression, because it can very frequently be wrong, which it certainly has been for me. Don't become defensive. Keep calm. Watch out for your reaction. Control your temper. Again, very big. Let them finish. Let them finish. Give them a chance to speak, and then try to build bridges of understanding, and don't build higher barriers. Just two more real quick. It says that this helps to disarm, disarm opponents. And I think this one is really key right here, which I think Magna Bosco did really good with you, but it's don't try to push the entire thing at one time. And it says, like, promise to think about your opponent's ideas and study them carefully. Your opponent may be right. You never want to hear, we try to tell you, but you wouldn't listen. So I believe he gives away some like tokens or whatever for you to do like 3 different talks. So I think giving some people some time to calm down, to digest and everything, that could be really well. And and then the last one is apologize for mistakes you might make, but I already said that. So yeah, look for areas in agreement, because everyone always wants to jump to the areas in which we disagree with. But I do think finding some areas of agreement might be good. So by the way, switch it up right here. Are you a Cowboys fan?
I'm not really into football too much, so I
Okay.
couldn't say that. Yeah.
If you tell me you don't like country music, I'm going to lose every ounce of respect for you right now, Dan.
Well, I've got bad news for you then, because I don't have any playlists on my Spotify account with country music. I'll say that much.
I'm Mexican, so my mom growing up, she would only listen to country music, and that was like the most embarrassing thing in the world, because like my Mexican and black friends would get in, like my mom was just playing country music all the time, so I literally had to start liking it, or I would have gone insane. But what kind of music do you like?
Let's see. I like I'm one of those people that would call their tastes eclectic.
Okay,
I would
yeah, me
say
too.
on average, I listen to a lot of indie rock
Indie.
stuff. I've recently been getting into, like, I've always liked electronic music. I've recently been getting into more drum and bass stuff. I kind of let whatever YouTube recommends for me for that, and that's good when I'm working, to listen to instrumental kind of stuff. So,
Any chance Built to Spill? Is indie?
no, I don't know that I do.
Oh, they're like my favorites, and then they're indie. And then any chance Minus the Bear?
I think I've heard Minus the Bear.
Really.
I think
And
they've
then
come
one
up.
more.
Yeah.
I'm not huge on indie. I'm more alternative, but there is one more I want to ask you about. Grizzly Bear. Grizzly Bear.
Yeah, I like Grizzly
Those
Bear.
guys, those guys are good, but they're probably a little bit too mainstream at this point, right? I think more people.
They had that one song kind of blow up, and then I think more people know about them. So yeah.
What about do you consider Mumford and Sons? What do you consider them?
I don't know if I call them indie. I'd have to see what Wikipedia says. I don't know.
And just do you like any other sports? Do you like I guess the Astros or the Dallas Mavericks?
I'm the only sport that I really watch is chess.
Really? What's your rating?
Well, on chess.com, I'm like an 800. I'm not super amazing, but
Okay.
I do like
I,
playing it now.
I'm like 1750 right now.
Okay, so you're much better than me.
Oh, I play every day. I play chess is like my downtime. It's like I'd say I play at least 30 minutes a day, but it's more just to like at the end of the night. Whenever I have like, I'll just play sometimes for like an hour straight because it helps me just relax and
I've only gotten into it about a year ago.
Yeah, we should play on time. Watch the Christian beat the atheist online.
Anybody can add me on chess.com. I'm Objectively Dan on chess.com. I'm open.
Okay, well, we have to do it. You know, it'd be fun. On round 2, we'll set up a game and we'll play a few games and then just have some conversation. So we'll have to like be dovetailing. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
But okay, any chance you watch MMA?
Yeah, I can't say I do.
No. Okay. All right. By the way, just last question with that. You look really tall. You look like you're at least 6'1", 6'3".
I'm 6'5".
Whoa! Wow. So you could like eat me, man. I'm a short guy.
I wouldn't eat you because I'm vegan, but you know, I am a pretty tall guy. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. My dad is actually 6 feet tall, and I'm 5'6". So, and he has all of his hair. So I'm not entirely sure. When I think about it, he's my dad because I got screwed at the genetics. But okay. By the way, okay. So I think we have 1 or 2 more questions, and then at the end, I'll give you a chance to ask me a question if you want. But okay, here we go. I guess it's the last one. I really do want to ask you about this because I was doing this podcast with atheist co-hosts for about a year before I built up the courage to go like live because I was so upset about my performance. I had to really heavily edit the stuff, and I'm like, like just totally jumping, all the biting my tongue. So, but one thing I don't think I could possibly do is to do a call-in show because it seems like you got to be really, really quick on your feet. So, does that ever become an issue for you?
So, you know, it is a skill that you kind of have to practice, especially with a call-in show that is in broad in topics as mine. Some days I might be talking about Bigfoot. Some days I might be talking about Christianity or ghosts or whatever. Like, there's a lot to consider in that framework. So not only do you have to be knowledgeable, but also entertaining enough for people to want to, you know, tune in to watch you. So it did take a little bit of skill and practice. In fact, before Truth Wanted started, we did a lot of practice episodes. I practiced for maybe, I want to say it was 2 or 3 months before we actually went live. Yeah. Because I had never done that stuff before. I mean, I've had a little bit of experience public speaking and stuff, but I wasn't like live on the internet a whole lot besides the podcasts that I'd record here and there. But that was also with just people I knew. My show focuses on having new guests every single week. So an advantage that I always try to bring to the table is like having that guest with their expertise come in to comment on things that I may not be completely knowledgeable on. For example, you know, I'd say compared to the average American, I know more about what Muslim scholars have to say about the Quran or any of the hadiths. Like I know some things here and there, but I'm not a topic expert on that. But if I have an ex-Muslim co-host on that, they'll be able to answer those kinds of questions. So being another kind of skill in hosting is being able to use your guests to your advantage as well.
Oh, that's great. By the way, who's the what's the skill of the Wendingos? What is your skill?
Oh,
what is your knowledge? Mythology?
Well, she talks a lot about trans rights specifically.
Oh, okay.
And you know, writes a lot of essays about science and things like that. So she's really knowledgeable in that.
Does she do the Wendigo thing to like shield her identity from like doxing and stuff?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think also, you know, it's just fun to have fun with an aesthetic like that. You know, it's definitely very memorable, right? Obviously, you're still talking about her. So
I always thought it was Wendigo, but I guess it's Wendigo. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess it's tomato. You know, I don't really know the etymology behind the wording there. So
Any chance you ever saw a movie called Ravenous with Guy Pearce?
No, I can't say I have.
You ever heard of it?
No, I don't think so.
This movie definitely came out before you were born.
Okay, well, that's
but
probably
you know
why I
Guy
haven't seen
Pearce
it.
from Memento.
I've never seen Memento. I really want to, though.
Oh God! Now that I think about when that movie came out, you must have only been 3 years old. That's so.
Well, that was like
that's
the
so,
early 2000s, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
You
so I
must
was
have been
like
like about
6 or
3.
7, you know.
2001. It came out. It
Yeah,
came
I
out
was
right
like
my
5
freshman year.
years old.
But
So.
in that movie, it's about, I guess he gets attacked by a Wendigo or Wendigo, and then he becomes like a Wendigo. So it's a pretty crazy, it's a pretty messed up story, man. I mean, if I wasn't a Christian, I'd use some profanity to see how messed up that story is. Yeah, I'm sure as a vegan, you wouldn't appreciate that storyline very much. But okay, so getting into the last question, the last segment part of this, in your call-in show, how do you gauge and or diffuse callers who may be upset with your saying? Like how do you are you trying to? Because you can't see them. I think that's the other problem too. You can't see what's going on if they're. So yeah, even now when I do this, I don't always get the body language that someone's saying because I might be looking or reading notes, and I'll watch it back and I'm like, oh shoot, this person was really pissed off. Like I was not reading their body language. So,
well, when
you have that disadvantage.
When it comes to callers, quite frankly, I'm not responsible with how comfortable they feel about what I'm saying, right? I may say something that's going to upset them because it directly contradicts their worldview and their way of thinking. And that's a liability that they had whenever they called into the show. It's not like I'm making them talk to me, like they're calling me, so I feel no ethical qualms about that in particular, but obviously that's not ideal, right? So going back to what I said before, just making sure that I'm giving them a chance to speak their mind, making sure that they feel like they're being heard, and giving them that assurance of saying, yes, I understand what you're saying. Let me repeat back what you're saying. And this is what I have to say in response. This is why I don't think that works, or this is why I disagree with what you have to say. Because yes, it's important to try to build that repertoire, but at the same time, you're going to disagree with people, and you have to. There's some things that you can't be a moderate on. You can't just like say, oh, well, different strokes for different folks. For example, if somebody's saying, oh, I just think all LGBT people should die, and I'm like, well, I'll compromise with you in the middle and say maybe they can't have rights. Like, you can't do that. That's not my worldview. That's not what I'm going to say. I'm going to say, no, actually, not only should they have the right to live, but also they should have equal rights in our society as much as any straight cis person would. So, there's some things that I'm not going to play centrist on. I'm just going to say, look, this is how it is, and this is why.
But do you find then that there's some things that you can say I can agree to disagree upon, and then some things you're going to say I don't agree to disagree on that, because this happened in a topic I had with do you know Canadian Atheists, by the way?
I believe I do. There's a lot of names out there, but I think I've seen him on Twitter.
Coolest dude, coolest atheist on this planet. He's not an evangelical atheist though, so he's kind of like, hey, I don't believe, but if you believe, like, whatever. Really the nicest. I've interviewed about 40 or 50 atheists. He's got to be the nicest one I've interviewed so far. But anyway, there's in the course of our talk, I said, well, we're gonna have to agree to disagree on that. And he's like, all right, well, I don't agree to disagree, but we can move on. So it's like, because, the truth is that there's, okay, so everyone's only processing half a percentage point of what there is to know in the universe. You know what I mean? In that other 99.45% that's out there, there could be information that totally changes your mind on what you believe right now,
Sure.
So we're going off of the best information that we have. And if we're being honest, so we're ignorant about most of the things out there, one. Two, we have biases. We have biases that we have, and we have misinformation that we believe. That's another big one. People don't really want to talk about that, but you grow up and you learn something. Let's just say something like Christopher Columbus discovered America, or that the world was round, or something like that. And you hear that in school, and you take that, you're like, oh, okay, I believe this, whatever, you know. But you might learn something. You trust your teachers are telling you the right thing, and then it turns out that they have information wrong. So you learn facts that aren't true. So there's a lot of things that are going on, so that you have to take into consideration. You know, you could just be like literally. I kind of think you ever heard the expression? Because what's his name? The Holy Kool-Aid talked about this phenomenon where you're like, it sounds like you're lying on intentionally lying, but it just turns out that like you just have like faulty information or whatever, you know? So
Sure.
Like, here's an example. Colin Powell, whenever he was making his case to invade Iraq, he was lying out his ass, but he didn't know that he was lying because he'd been presented with really faulty information. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, you got to take that into consideration. And then just, we're not all the same age. We all didn't go to the same school. We all didn't grow up in the same socioeconomic background. You know, we don't have the same cultural baggages holding us down.
So, I mean, I think, you know, to be clear, if I'm ever going to make a statement along the lines of I agree to disagree, what I'm saying when I say that is you continuing to have this belief isn't going to radically affect my life or the lives of others in any significant way that's worth fighting over, right? But that's not something I'm going to take with every single belief I encounter. If I'm encountering somebody who is a Scientologist, I'm not going to say I agree to disagree. I'm going to say, no, actually, this ideology is harmful and has recordedly, demonstrably been so. And so I'm not going to agree that Scientology should be counted as a religion and not a business, and you know, continue on their merry way, right? So like again, like I understand the importance of wanting to get along with people, but you tend to lose ground in terms of losing particular rights with people because you can take a passive stance by saying, oh, well, I'm just going to agree to disagree. You know, you mentioned this term of evangelical atheist, and I think you say that in reference to atheists who are interested in other people deconstructing their beliefs and you know, becoming atheists right away. And I think that there is you know, some moral argument to be had there if we're talking about somebody who's a part of, say, a lobbyist organization that's taking away women's choice over their bodies, or a group that is bullying a secular group on campus or an LGBT group on campus by taking down college posters and stuff. This is what I was told was happening with the Secular Student Alliance at the University of Texas at San Antonio. Yes, that they put posters up for their group and they would constantly be taken down. And that they suspect was a particular Christian group on campus that was doing this. So, you know, there's room for some compromises, but more often than not, I find that no, I will take a hard stance if I have to, if it means protecting the rights of those involved.
Well, that makes sense. I think, I totally get that. I totally get that. And the way that you express it right now about where to take the stand and where to dig your heels in, I think is really good to take into consideration. And by the way, too, more than what I refer to, there's an abusive element of atheism that is like, we're going to question your mental health and your intelligence if you believe this. But you do not know what someone else experienced or how they came to said conclusions, you know? So it could be the case that, like, Jesus is my roommate and, you know, like, he's staying in the next room over here. And I could have that level of information. You know, he materializes all of our groceries on a weekly basis. And for me, that would be completely logical, completely rational for me to be a Christian, you know? So the fact that you wouldn't know that fact or whatever, and that's just an extreme example, but
well,
You
The
don't hold on, but you don't know what someone else's experience. You don't know what they're, so to say that they're mentally unstable or they're unintelligent because they believe this, you do not know why they believe that. But good.
Well, so to make accusations unfounded that somebody might be, for example, mentally unstable, as I agree, not a proper way to conduct discourse in any sense of the word. But that also doesn't mean that someone who would have a record of those things should not be called out for, having that in a background or in a history. Like most ex-Christians I know have faced the kind of abuse in some form or another in the way that they were taught, or in many cases what they would describe as indoctrinated into their
Yeah.
beliefs. So it's quite fair to point out sometimes, like, when this is happening, is it fair to judge every single person's experience as, oh, this is how they came to be? Of course not. But you can't ignore it either. You can't say, well, this doesn't happen, because it does happen and it has to be addressed. And quite frankly, I haven't seen it addressed enough in Christian communities. I see it in the deconstruction communities, but it's weird that it's never really expressed in those communities as a whole.
Well, I certainly, in the last talk I had with Ex-Fundy, I got into a little bit of that myself, because I have been very open about some of the really abusive stuff I experienced growing up inside of the home of a minister, Mm-hmm. So there's one being an indoctrination. And so I was telling her, she was like a little bit weirded out that I was telling her, like, I want my daughter to go in and check out, Islam and Hinduism and Sikhism as I've experienced it, because that's what's built my faith, is going out and exploring and talking to people and meeting people. So I would never want to deny my daughter the experience of going out and finding God, like the way that I traveled the world and explored and stuff like that. So I think the indoctrination, my mom literally might as well have just taken me down to a brothel, and she might as well take me down to the pub and just started up an account, a tab on hers to pay for my drinks, because the way that she pushed me over was really, really, and I do not think I would have went as crazy and getting all the tattoos and everything had I not ran so hard away from that indoctrination, because it's traumatizing. It is flat out absolutely traumatizing, and the fact that Christians don't address it enough, I think, is bad, and it really needs to be talked about. And some of the stuff is very dangerous, and especially probably the LGBT issue, the way that Christians behave on that one. That's got to be probably the worst way I think Christians have failed. So, not that I'm entirely okay with it myself, but we do support an LGBT anti-bullying campaign through this podcast. So we have donated some money.
I was just going to add, there's no atheist parents that I've known that have kicked their kids out for being gay. So if you have any stories on that, I'd love to know. But I don't think it's really
about being gay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I do. I'll tell you this. I do think that Christians can learn a lot of things from atheism. I didn't answer that side for myself, but certainly the questioning, because I think in order to become an atheist, you have to start wrestling with some philosophical ideas and kind of have your worldview shattered to, like, because most people are raised religious. So you have to deconstruct that, which means you've had to start thinking logically and scientifically, philosophically. So I definitely think Christians can learn in that sense from atheists, but also just, you were talking about how what Christians think about atheists as far as being like immoral or bad or whatever. I think Christians can learn a lot about humanism from atheists. I really do. I'm not someone who tries to dehumanize atheists, because one, I was myself an atheist for a while, and I certainly know what I went through. And so I don't want to project what I've learned now as like a 40-year-old guy onto you or someone else or an 18-year-old person I'm meeting. I just want to meet people where they're at, try to understand, and try to my mission as my philosophy as a missionary is, before I tell anybody that God loves them, like I want to show them that I love them first. Because a lot of Christians, their mentality is, well, God may hate you, or God may love you, but I hate you. It's like, what does that sound like to a person where you're trying to say, look at God loves you, but I have a disdain for you. I personally cannot stand you. The Bible talks about, actually, it says, the Bible talks about, says like, you need to be taking care of the people who are in front of you. You should be loving them, because if you can't love the person who's in front of you, how are you going to love God who you cannot see? The people you can see. But I do want to ask you one last question. But how do you know when it's time to hang up, or when it's time to be useless, when it's useless to talk to someone? Like, how do you gauge that?
So every host that does a call-in show has their own personal limits. There was one time on Talk Heathen where a guy said, "I think every single gay person should be in jail," like literally just as a rule.
Oh God!
And said it just completely unironically, sincerely had this belief, and I at that moment in time I was just like, I can't handle this. This is just absolutely ridiculous, and I will shame this person because that is a belief I think that's worth shaming. But for the most part, I'd say my tolerance is pretty high. That's probably because, again, I am a straight cis white guy, and so like my my tolerance for abuse is probably higher because I have not received as much abuse as some of my colleagues have in various in their various identities. So, with that, patience means I put up with a lot, but it also means I have to consider my listener, right? What is my listener going to do? I look at the chat and I see what people say, and sometimes chat's like, just move on, just end this call. And some people are like, oh, wait, keep going. This was a good call, So I have to kind of take a listen to that. In general, I think people are more interested when there's more of a back and forth in these kinds of conversations. There are definitely some people that call in who just want to say what they want to say and do not give a flip about what I have to say or the guest has to say. And those are the ones that people tend to like the least, naturally. So I think the ones where there's a conversation actually going somewhere, those are the ones that I think people find to be the most entertaining.
Hey, I'm just curious. I called into Talk Heathen last week and talked to J Mike, and right from the start, like I arrived like 10 minutes early, and then like 5 minutes later, the girl gets on the line, because I'm thinking they're probably not even going to take my call, and she gets on the line and she's like, "Well, you should know that we like to prioritize theists," because I told them I was a Christian, and then she goes, "And you're going to be the first caller they take," and I just about pooped my pants, because I wasn't exactly like. Normally you could wait for them to be talking and kind of get into it, and so they just, you're going right in there. So why do they do that? Why do they prioritize the deist calling?
Well, because at its heart, Talk Heathen is a show for activism. It's a show that wants to prioritize those kinds of conversations so that people can get different things out of it. They can either emulate those conversations for things that they have with people in their own life. They can give great talking points to what theists might give and see what those responses are live in a conversational setting, as opposed to just, reading a list of arguments on a web page. There's lots of different reasons, but yeah, primarily it's for an activist sense. Like most of our audience is atheist watchers, right? It's mostly geared towards those kinds of people or people who are questioning. So there are, by extension, less theist callers that call in. So we want to prioritize those callers when they do call in.
And with the Atheist Experience, is that just primarily like they don't want these callers calling into that? Because one time I saw Dillahunty, and he was like, he's talking to a Christian. He's like, "You realize you've called into an atheist like talk show?" I'm like, what? Kind of like, you would think that they would want to be talking to atheists, but is that one specifically just geared toward like for and towards atheists?
So like, no, because I mean they take theist calls too. In fact, that they oftentimes prioritize theist calls as well. That's definitely I would say the most hardcore of our shows in terms of back and forth. It's I want to say debate, but it's not really debate. It's more most hardcore, I guess, conversations between theists and atheists, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm out of questions. So if you have a question you want to ask me before we go out, I'll give you one question if you want to ask.
Well, sure. Before we talked and got on this show, we talked a little bit about morality. And I thought that you had an interesting idea about humans and morality. I believe your claim was something along the lines of how Christians, basically atheism doesn't have a worldview that can explain morality in people, whereas Christianity does. Am I correct in summarizing that?
Completely. I mean, you might have. I'm not saying. I've never said that atheists are like immoral or unempathetic. Maybe they actually live it out. Maybe they actually live out empathetically more than Christians that I know. If I'm being honest with you, that's my honest to God take. So it's not like that's not to diminish atheists, but I was speaking more about the. I would call it atheist ideology specifically, because atheists do like to say that, well, the only thing we deny is God, but that's not exactly possible. That's not possible. You have to believe in several other things that are going to follow as a result of that. So it's a bit in my opinion, it's a bit dishonest to say that's the only thing that we are denying. So you can come to those conclusions about empathy, but it's going to be, you're going to have to add some other stuff onto that, in my opinion. And so for me as a Christian, when I hear to love my neighbor as myself, the way that I interpret that is I have to disembody myself, put myself into someone else's bodies, and then literally think about how would I treat Isaiah Perez. And so when I'm loving my neighbor as myself and I'm treating the person the way that I want to be treated, there's a rational basis to do that. And I can't really find that inside of atheism. That doesn't mean they don't, maybe they ironically live it out better than Christians, but I just don't find it inside of atheism.
So I find that curious in the context of an anthropological perspective, right? Do you believe that human beings are like evolved beings from
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So like do you also like concur with the conclusion that like human beings, like modern human beings, have been around for at least like 200,000 years?
Sure.
Right?
I totally believe in evolution and Big Bang and all that. I'm not like a 6,000. I'm not a young earther.
Okay. So like if you agree with those premises, I assume you also would agree with the idea that like there was a point in human history where Judaism and subsequently Christianity like came about, right? Like there was people, then there were other religions, then one of them being Judaism and then Christianity, right? Like that's agreeable to you?
Yeah, that came about later. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I have some very different, I have some very untraditional beliefs as far as that goes, but it's not exactly some unorthodox. Actually, I have some very unorthodox views on that. Okay. But yeah, absolutely. Like understanding, like rearing, like how guys are the way that they are, it only makes sense if you understand evolution, socialization and hunting, gathering. That just totally makes sense. So you have to understand in those terms. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess, okay. So bearing all that in mind, right? I'm curious about this idea of morality because I've heard this from other Christians as well, for Christians who are specifically like yourself, who do believe that humans are evolved beings and do believe that like Judaism and subsequently Christianity came about in specific periods of human history, because the implication, it almost seems, is that before Judaism and before Christianity, people could not have possibly had an understanding of what's truly right and wrong. Like it seems that if morality is ultimately in justification from the teachings of Judaism and Christianity, like for most of human history, like humans weren't able to achieve that.
No, I wouldn't say that, because I definitely do think that God has he has given us some, like, I guess you could say he wrote it on our heart. Now, most people, and even I said, just because you know it doesn't mean that many Christians live it out. Like, I'll just give you an example. Christians love to talk about the LGBT plus community, They love to bash those people. But if you could just imagine if those Christians were being picketed for the stuff that they were doing, like greed or idolatry, for being materialistic, whatever, if they try to go to their bins or whatever, and people are there with protesters calling them really bad names or doxing them or doing whatever they might do, they wouldn't want to be treated like that themselves. Because if you're being honest as a Christian, you live up to maybe 10-20% of what Jesus' standards that he sets on us. So you got to take that in consideration and be honest. So yeah, I'm not saying that Christians actually live that out, because I don't believe that. I don't believe that in the slightest sense of the word, that Christians actually live it out. But the basis there is actually, like, there is a basis. We're told to love your neighbor the same way as you love yourself. And that's so much deeper than just saying, don't do bad things to people. That's just, it's so much richer, because people often talk about Christianity having roots like in Buddhism, Buddhist philosophy, but that's quite a bit different to say, don't do things to people that you wouldn't want to do unto you, and then turning around and saying, actually do things that you wouldn't want done unto you, And I understand that runs into a problem in itself, because there's a variety of what things that people want to be done to themselves. But yeah, so that's not to bash atheists in any sense of the word. Are we clear on that?
Oh yeah, I guess my concern when asking that isn't necessarily about bashing atheists, but I find it interesting that yourself and other Christians seem to have this idea or claim that Christianity is unique in its moral claims, in the sense that no other human being can actually live up to the standard set up by this standard, and this being the ultimate standard, right?
Mm-hmm.
That defined by the life and the teachings of Jesus Christ. But
that's interesting.
Also this idea of morality being written on our hearts is also just a Christian idea to me. I don't really understand how that would work. But
I'll tell you what, Dan, and I'll be the first to admit this. If you disembodied me again and totally subjectively evaluated my life from me, like not knowing, I would condemn myself in a heartbeat. That's not even so I don't have any qualms to understand that the things that I know to be right and wrong, I don't live up to. Anybody objectively observe that about me would totally come to that same conclusion. So I don't think, this is why you wouldn't need God to send anybody to hell. You would not need that. The only thing you would need is to literally just take one person and have them use the same exact standard that they use on other people on themselves, and everybody would be condemned. So I really do believe that we know the difference between right and wrong. There's a really big difference. And I think in Matrix too, I think Morpheus tells Neo, he says, you'll understand that there's a big difference between knowing the truth and actually living the truth. And I think it's in context to the actual Matrix, but maybe we could really dive into that one in the next talk. That would be really fun to have a game of chess going on. Maybe I'll give you like a rook.
That might get boring. I don't know if people would want to watch that, but
yeah,
I don't know how much of your audience is into chess.
Yeah, I love it. It's literally one of my favorite things on the planet. But yeah, thank you so much. Maybe next time you could come back on, maybe you could put me in the hot seat and just really grill me on that. But how's Demi, by the way?
How's who? Sorry?
Demi. Moore.
Oh yeah. I don't keep up with them super often
Since the divorce.
Yeah.
Hey, I really want to thank you for your time. I really, really, really want to appreciate your time. I think really to talk about, really it's true. Both sides can learn from each other. And I think that's one of the biggest tragedies, when both sides think that they have all the answers or all the correct behavior. I really think that we should take a step back and say, let's all help each other out on this planet. Holy Kool-Aid released a really good video about the backward paradox or whatever. And I really, really wish more Christians would watch that. I really do. Because I think there's light years that we can learn about from atheists as believers. But do you have any last thoughts, bro?
I don't think I have any last thoughts. I'll let you. I know we're at like an hour and a half for the show now. I think that's a little over what you usually do, but I appreciate you coming on and thanks again. Sorry,
thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. I'm used to thanking other people for being on my show.
I know, right? I was like, well, I'm on your show. Yeah, I really got caught up in some of the stuff that you had to say. I take some notes here, so I think I'm going to process this, and maybe if you come back like in a couple of months, we could talk about some more things. But yeah, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for kicking me in the ass about my website. I got to get that thing back up because I normally plug it right now.
All I said was, hey, did you know your website's down?
Yeah, I think I really appreciate that. But I will get it back. I should get it back up. But so just real quick, we're supporting the 5 nonprofits. You're probably going to choose the anti-LGBT bullying campaign, but we have that one. North Korean refugees, single mothers here in South Korea, Nazi deconversion, and Jewish and Palestinian peace organization that I got to.
You know what? I'll go with the Nazi deconversion.
Really?
Actually. Yeah. Just because you said I was going to go with the other one, and I'm going to be a contrarian. So
we've donated several $100s to them, and the guy the guy is an ex-Nazi for 27 years, deconverted actually by the guy who's this podcast is based on, which is Daryl Davis, who sits down and talks to KKK and Nazis, and he wanted deconverting a lot of them just with compassion and care and not trying to argue with them, and they just naturally. I talked about them, the Inception and the Matrix thing. It's like his idea is that if he tries to force them to do it, they're going to reject it. So it's better to let them come to the conclusions by themselves. But yeah, that being said, I want to thank you for joining us today at RG Podcast. Check us out at Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, just about anywhere you can find us. And if you're not subscribed, please do so. Very, very, very special thanks to Dan. I guess you're going to have to get a smoothie because you don't drink coffees, but we did send you out a Starbucks card or give it to your girlfriend or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
thanks again for giving that, by the way. That's very kind of you.
Absolutely. We're going to leave you with this outro. And if you can stick around for 1 minute afterwards, we'll leave you with this outro. And again, thanks for watching.